Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies here. Today, the video is about giving yourself enough time to share your work with people. So many times this happened to me, and maybe this has happened to you. I've certainly heard this from a lot of people, although this doesn't really happen to me anymore, is people at my workshops will say, I always forget to do the pitch. I always forget to mention that I have other things coming up. I'll do a talk and I'll forget to mention the weekend workshop. I'll do a weekend workshop. I forget to mention I've got this more in-depth mentorship program, or I'm talking with somebody and I don't mention I've got a workshop coming up. So maybe you can relate. You get to the end of your time at the end of the workshop and you didn't mention it. Or you get to the end of the workshop and there's 10 minutes left. You think, oh, I've got to talk about these other programs I'm doing, but there's this one, let me say one last thing. I'm going to get one more piece of content out. And you do that, which gives you about 30 seconds then to rush through what you have to offer, which usually turns into, well, anyway, you can check it out on my website, or there's some posters at the back, or talk to me if you're interested, and that kind of thing. So here's the truth. If this keeps happening to you, it's not because you're forgetting. It's because you're avoiding it. If it was really a priority for you to make sure that you mentioned your products and services at the right time, you would do it. It would be put into the system of the workshop. You'd be prioritizing it. You'd say, okay, I'm going to make sure I have time. So here's a simple thing you can do, and this was a game changer for me. I believe I might have heard this first from Jesse Korn or Charlotte Jacobs of Thrive Academy. But you don't do the pitch right at the end. This is the big mistake so many people make, is they leave mentioning any of their further product services to the very, very end of the workshop, and then they try to shoehorn it in. But of course, at that point, you probably do have one more thing you want to say. There's probably one more question you'd like to answer. And now people are starting to get ready to go, and they're already getting their stuff on. And mentally, they've already sort of left. It's a bad moment to do it. So when I'm doing a day-long workshop, when we come back from lunch, there's an hour and a half lunch. And when we come back, I give people 10 minutes just in small groups to debrief the morning and to talk about how they could imagine applying it. Then I do some Q&A. So are there any questions today, just to ease ourselves back in? And then I say, okay, so here's some things I want to talk about. And I take out this little form, which I should have had for this video, but basically it's a little card, and it lists the follow-up options. So do you want to join my email list? Do you want to be on the advanced notice list for my weekend workshops, for my puttering sessions, for the mentorship program? And would you like to host this workshop? Do you think you could get 20 people there? So I say, look, I'm going to give this out at the end. But if I leave it to the end, I never give myself enough time. So I'm just going to take a minute right now. And I just walk through each of them. Here's what they all are. It's not a lot. This is not a heavy anything. I just say, here's what they are. And then at the end, when I give out the forms, they already know. So if you're going to share your next level something, don't wait until the very end to do it. Put that somewhere in the middle. So in teleseminars, this is often the case. They'll share about it somewhere in the middle. And I know that sometimes people get cranky about that because they just want content. Well, of course, yeah, wouldn't you love it if just everything worked out for you? You get to join an email list and it's only content. There's never any pitches. You go to a workshop, they never even mention they have anything else. I understand. And there are certain realities of business. Who was it who I heard this from? He talked about, the idea was it's a 10-to-1 ratio for social media. That every 10 things you share, one of them gets to be a shameless plug. But the other 10 things are valuable, interesting, relevant, helpful, of interest to the people who are following you. But if you try to imbalance it the other way, you share 10 shameless plugs and then only one piece of value, people will unsubscribe. So I think that 10-to-1 ratio is probably a useful idea. And of course, I've seen pitches go way too long. My God, I've seen pitches, suddenly it's a 90-minute teleseminar and it's a half-hour pitch. So I get it. I know there's something that's too long, or you go to a day-long workshop and all of a sudden half of it is them pitching. So I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, by the power invested in me, by absolutely no one at all, I give you permission to talk about your work and to make sure you give yourself time. Find the place where it makes sense in your teleseminar, your workshop, where if you're doing a talk, find a place where you can just pause and mention these things, to speak about them. And it's not always going to be appropriate. But if it's just, I always keep forgetting to do it. No, you're not forgetting to do it. You're not prioritizing it. You're not making it important enough to make a system for, to make sure that it happens. Once you do that, you'd be amazed. It just happens every time, right? I come back from lunch, they debrief, we do some Q&A, and then I share my thing. And it just happens every time like that. Boy, and then you may be amazed how many people actually did want to hear about it. Where I'll share these things. I'll say, are there any questions? And all of a sudden, there are 2 or 3 people that are asking a lot of questions about my mentorship program. Yeah, and I answer them. I say, are there any other questions? And maybe say, well, what about the Puttering Sessions? I answer a question there. And maybe that's it. And I say, great. And we move on. So you don't need to belabor it. You don't need to linger there longer than it serves. You don't need to do that super heavy-handed pitch. I mean, there's other videos that, I've made with my thoughts about people putting way too much weight on the pitch. So that's another conversation. But anyways, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Hopefully that's helpful. Take care.